It all begins with our protagonist named Asahi running as fast as he can towards the classroom where he suspects his classmate named Yuko is in order to deliver a letter declaring his love. Upon entering, our boy sees something in the girl that shocks and scares him, causing him to let out a loud scream. But what did he see? We'll see that later on. For now, let's go back to the morning of the same day. Getting to know Asahi a bit more, his friends Oka, Sakura, and Shima describe him as an empty basket because the boy has the inability to keep secrets, as his facial expressions and words always give him away, so he makes his other classmates feel bad for his sincerity. Despite this, there is one secret that our protagonist keeps to himself, which is that he is in love with his classmate named Yuko. That's why he always stares at her without her noticing, but this time she looks back at him, making Asahi so nervous that he causes chaos in the classroom. This causes the teacher named Akari to reprimand him, but luckily for him, the class delegate named Nagisa jumps in to prevent the altercation between these two from escalating, so the boy couldn't be more grateful to Akari. Later, after an embarrassing scene in physical education class, the protagonist's friends encourage him to confess his feelings to Yuko, as it turns out they already knew about the boy's secret love, obviously because he is quite expressive with his gestures. Faced with this, both Sakura and Shima tell the boy that it's not wrong to have a secret love, as it doesn't harm anyone, but Oka jumps in to oppose the other's statements, as he mentions to the protagonist that keeping love for someone's secret only leads to one hurting themselves, and to make his point of view more convincing. He reminds him that he was previously rejected by Nagisa for not being able to confess his feelings to her in time. After this, both Oka and Sakura and Shima give their full support to our boy to confess his love to the girl he likes, to which he, feeling truly supported by them, runs towards the classroom where he suspects Yuko is. This brings us to the beginning of this story, where we can now answer the question of what Asahi saw when he found Yuko in the classroom. Well, he found that the girl now has wings and bat fangs, and that's why the protagonist is so scared that he lets out a loud scream. But at the same time, the girl also screams. After this, she asks him if he managed to see her, to which the boy tells her no. But as he is unable to lie, his gaze says otherwise. That's why Yuko is forced to confess to him that she is a vampire. And she tells him that now that he has discovered her biggest secret, she will have to leave school according to her father's protocol. Asahi doesn't intend to let the girl he likes leave school just like that, because besides liking her, he would love for her to spend more time at school and enjoy it more, something she couldn't do all this time. That's why, to prevent her departure, he promises her that he will make a huge sacrifice to keep her secret like he has never kept one before. That's why he asks her to be close friends so that it will be harder for him to reveal the secret to our protagonist, to which she tearfully accepts, which makes our protagonist more than happy. That same evening, the two of them head home together, and the boy couldn't be happier to have the girl he likes as a friend. Or well, that's what it seemed, because every time she mentions the word friend, it's like a stab to his heart, which saddens him. As the two continue walking home and chatting on the other side of the street, we can see Nagisa watching them carefully, as she finds it odd that they're together. For that reason, the next day in class, the girl can't help but keep her eyes on the protagonist, who is again watching Yuko. Somehow, this makes Nagisa jealous, so she shoots a hateful look at the boy, making him nervous. This leads to nothing, so remembering that Asahi wanted to tell her something important in the past, but couldn't because she didn't let him, she decides to confront the boy after class, shouting at him if what he wanted to tell her was if he was in love with her. Faced with such a sudden question, Asahi replies yes, like he wanted to tell her that, but he couldn't. This relieves the girl, but at the same time, it puts her in an embarrassing situation because having shouted that, the other students stare at the two of them. And to make matters worse, our boy's friends arrive to take him away after the girl put him through this awkward moment. Hours later in the classroom, the protagonist watches Yuko eating, as she can only eat when no one is watching, but well, now he has our boy watching her. After she finishes her meal, the girl is still hungry, so her stomach keeps growling, and although she tries to hide this, Asahi notices it easily. That's why Yuko, in an attempt to keep the boy from seeing her feeling hungry, pushes him, causing him to drop some snacks that were on a table. Faced with this, the girl notices them, grabs them, and starts devouring them. But it was a bad idea because those snacks had spicy spices, which drives the girl crazy, begging Asahi to bring her some water. This is in vain because when the protagonist heads to the door to go out and fetch water, upon opening it, he encounters Nagisa, who upon seeing Yuko, discovers her secret. The girl, upon seeing this small version of Nagisa, is simply amused, and while she begins to admire how cute she is, she accidentally reveals that she is a vampire. And likewise, Nagisa reveals that she is an extraterrestrial, so both of them, revealing their secrets to our protagonist, become But Nagisa, after revealing her secret to the boy, is forced to use a hammer to erase this memory from him because she knows perfectly well what the boy is like. Obviously, faced with this, Asahi feels afraid, so after dodging the girl's blows, And in the middle of her having a little chat with Yuko, the boy takes advantage and escapes from the place. This results in a chase between these two, which ends with Asahi surrendering after hearing the girl say that with the blow of the hammer, she will be able to forget both her secret and Yuko's. In this way, Nagisa prepares to give the protagonist the blow that will erase the secrets of her and Yuko. But before she could hit him, the vampire arrives just in time to prevent this because she doesn't really mind if our boy knows her secret because as friends, she trusts that he will keep it very well. These words cause her to cry inconsolably, and her crying caused the protagonist to apologize for putting her through this bad moment, which in turn causes Nagisa to drop her idea of hitting the boy and decides to leave him alone, mentioning that she trusts that he will keep her secret, just as he keeps Yuko's secret. After saying this, Nagisa leaves the place relieved, and even though she doesn't want to look at Asahi, she is forced to look at him where she hears his name in a conversation with Yuko. In this conversation, Yuko wanted to know if our protagonist was in love with Nagisa because she wants to help him conquer her. But to this, the boy gets angry with her and yells at her for saying such nonsense, which leaves her confused. On the other hand, Nagisa, seeing that these two don't seem to be compatible, feels relieved. The next day, as Asahi heads to his classroom, he notices that his classmate named Mikan, who is the president of the journalism club, has trapped his friends, aiming to force them to tell her if there's anything between him and Yuko. Otherwise, she threatens to expose them in the school newspaper with unseen photos of them. When the girl turns to look at the protagonist, she approaches him directly to ask if he has any romantic relationship with his classmate Yuko, to which he denies having anything with her. However, after Mikan shows him an incriminating recording, he is forced to flee the scene. Although shortly after, he ends up caught by her, so he is forced to confess that there is only a good friendship between him and Yuko. Mikan doesn't believe him at all, so she leaves our protagonist trapped and goes to interview Yuko directly. This alarms the protagonist so much that he manages to free himself and goes to his classroom to make sure Mikan doesn't interview Yuko. Fortunately, the girl is not in the classroom, so he feels relieved, so he asks his teacher what happened to his classmate. She responds that the girl is ill, so she entrusts him to deliver the assignments to the girl. But this won't be easy at all, as Mikan managed to hear the whole conversation from outside, so she chases the boy to tell her the truth about his affair with Yuko. Fortunately for the protagonist, in the midst of this pursuit, Nagisa manages to separate the boy from Mikan, but not for long as she manages to find them. Therefore, Nagisa asks the protagonist to go to Yuko's house to deliver her assignment as the teacher requested, while she takes care of retaining Mikan. In this way, Asahi arrives at his friend's house, and once he delivers her assignment, she invites him in and invites him to have tea. Despite this relaxing moment, suddenly the protagonist receives a call from Nagisa, who warns him that Mikan managed to deceive her with her words, and now she is heading to Yuko's house. But this does not go well for Mikan, as when trying to enter through Yuko's house window, she ended up being trapped by several objects that the vampire had stored in her closet. Similarly, this doesn't stop the girl, as we see that the next day she publishes a fictional photo of Asahi and Yuko having a romantic encounter, and the boy, upon seeing this fake photo, tears apart. Faced with this, Mikan lets him know that she has more photos like that and plans to spread them throughout the school, so she goes after it. This triggers another chase between these two, which ends up on the school rooftop, where our protagonist kneels and begs the girl not to spread the photos, as he has the bad feeling that if Mikan does that, Yuko will receive the looks of all her classmates, so she will be forced to leave the school. The girl refuses to fulfill this whim of the boy, so she mocks him and lets him know that she will spread the photos even more. For this reason, Asahi, remembering advice from his friend Oka, decides to pretend and tells Mikan that she can spread the photos without a problem, as he doesn't mind, although inside he does. Ironically, this plan worked perfectly, as the girl, knowing that the boy feels happy for her to spread the photos, feels that her work as a school journalist has failed, so she leaves the place feeling defeated, which leaves our protagonist more than relieved. Hours later, Mikan, after having been defeated by Asahi, feels that something from the past between her and him influenced her to give up, and while strangers are talking to her glasses, they let her know that she's in love with the boy, something she refuses to believe, so she tries to break them for telling her such nonsense. One day later, our protagonist and his friend Shima are castigated by the teacher for bringing exotic magazines to class, so the teacher asks Nagisa to correct them. Strangely, she did not attend classes today, which seems strange to the teacher as well as to Asahi, although at that the boy feels a small blow to his head, and it turns out that the mini Nagisa shot him to get his attention and ask for help. After this, the protagonist asks the teacher to go to the bathroom under an embarrassing excuse, and when she lets him go, he meets mini Nagisa, who asks the boy to help her recharge the battery of his robotic body, as it ran out of energy after experiencing various emotions from listening to an awkward conversation between him and Yuko. In this way, the mini Nagisa guides Asahi to where his robotic body is, the girl's bathroom, to which he enters nervously, and after picking up the girl's body, they both head towards the infirmary. On the way, they meet Yuko, who accompanies them there, and once the boy places Nagisa's body on one of the beds in the infirmary, he follows the orders of the mini version of her, thus managing to load the girl's robotic body. Shortly after this, the mini Nagisa, to express her gratitude to the protagonist for helping her, tells him that she will leave the room to make sure that there are no people outside. The bad thing about this is that as soon as the mini Nagisa leaves the place, Mikan finds her and grabs her thinking she's an action figure, so he doesn't hesitate to give her several tests to verify that she's a figure and not the fairy of the corridors, an urban legend she believes in. To the luck of our boy and Yuko, the mini Nagisa manages to pass all the tests, but the worst comes later, as Shima arrives on the scene and seeing the mini delegate, does not hesitate to try to remove her clothes. Faced with this, our boy is forced to confess to both Mikan and Shima that the figure of the mini delegate was made by him for adult purposes. This scares Mikan as well as Yuko and even Nagisa herself because of how that sounds. But in this moment of bad impression, Asahi takes the opportunity to take the mini delegate by force, and after this, he runs away as fast as he can from the place. He ends up hiding in the boys' bathroom, where he is safe from the girls but not from Shima, who, upon finding our protagonist, begins to harass him, asking him to hand over the mini Nagisa. Because of this, the boy runs away once again, and this time he ends up hiding in the school's storage room, where this time they are safe, but not for long. When Asahi tries to place a bag to block the door, the school director from her office uses her powers to make the bag grow, which causes the boy to fall. But the bag is not the only thing that grew, as strangely, the mini Nagisa also grew, now having the same size as her robotic body, which leaves them impressed and speechless. Leaving this aside, the protagonist helps the girl get up, but ends up falling on top of her, which makes the girl uncomfortable. On the other hand, this fall caused a loud noise that made Mikan, Yuko, and Shima discover the place where the protagonist is hiding, so they try to break down the door. To get out of this situation, the girl hits the boy so hard that she sends him flying, and after that, she explains to the girls that she did that after learning that Asahi made an action figure of her for pleasure purposes. After saying this, the girl runs out of the place, and when she manages to hide, in her mind, she apologizes to the protagonist for hitting him and thanks him for helping her out of this big trouble. Hours later, Asahi, while walking home with Yuko, explains to her everything that happened, and she is happy to know that the boy is not. On the other hand, Nagisa, seeing them together, can't help but feel bad, as she remembered that when she was in the warehouse with the protagonist, she felt something nice being so close to him. This resulted in her antenna glowing, indicating that she is really in love with our boy. On a rainy day, Asahi and Yuko head to school using umbrellas to protect themselves from the rain, as according to the girl, it will rain all day today. Unfortunately for her, this forecast turns out to be a lie, because hours later when they both arrive at school, we can see her with tan skin, as it turns out the sun eventually came out. Facing this, Nagisa asks the girl if she went to the beach, as she finds it strange that she has tan skin. Yuko responds that what actually happens is that she has sensitive skin, as every time she's under the sun's rays, her skin tends to tan quickly. That's why the delegate gets to work and starts training the girl to be able to avoid the sun's rays at all costs. The training takes place in the schoolyard and consists of Yuko moving from one bush to another as fast as she can, avoiding the sun. Despite all the effort put into the training, the girl is not able to avoid the sun's rays completely, but at least she feels more motivated for having been able to endure being under the sun for longer. The next day, as our boy heads to another day of classes, he reads a book about vampires, as he wants to know their weaknesses in order to help Yuko, but then he ends up encountering her, and she now has her skin clear and pale again. The girl, along with Nagisa, shows the protagonist that the training did serve some purpose, so he decides to run to school dodging the sun's rays, hiding in the shadows. This way, Yuko manages to get very far on her way to school. However, when she reaches a street where there are no shadows, she decides to give up. But Asahi and Nagisa don't think they'll let the girl give up so easily, so they come up with several solutions, like wearing UV protective clothing or a robotic suit like the one mini Nagisa wears. Obviously, none of these options are practical for Yuko, so she tells them not to bother helping her, since after the intense training, she feels capable of enduring the sun for longer, even if it means ending up with tan skin. Asahi doesn't intend to leave her alone with this problem, and to prevent her from suffering more from the sun, he recommends that she use sunscreen. So the next day, the girl follows this advice, and we can see her enjoying physical education classes like never before, and when the protagonist and Nagisa chase after her to ask her how she can now endure the sun's rays, she's forced to confess that she had never thought of using sunscreen, so the boy's idea came in handy. On another completely new day, Asahi and Yuko have a sort of date at the amusement park, where they have a blast on the roller coaster, and after this, they eat some ice cream to relieve the extreme tension from the roller coaster. After having fun on the rides, the girl mentions to our boy that she always wanted to come here for 2 reasons. First, because it was her wish, but she couldn't fulfill it due to her problem with the sun's rays. The second reason is because her parents had a date in this park, making this place special for Yuko. After telling this, the situation becomes awkward between Asahi and her, as the boy momentarily thought he was on a real date with the girl, and she, for her part, knows that her words were misinterpreted. So to set aside this topic, she decides to forcefully take the boy to the haunted house in the park. Once there, again, both go through an uncomfortable situation, because after both getting scared by some cries, they end up too close, so much so that they almost kiss. But this moment is interrupted by the arrival of the fake vampire, who tries to scare them as it's his job to do so, but he ends up scared after being scolded by the girl. In a completely different scene, a strange individual orders his servant to watch out for Yuko, not to reveal her identity as a vampire, to which he obviously agrees to his request as he must obey his boss. But despite this, the servant asks his boss that in case the girl has confessed her secret, he hands her over so that he can do whatever he wants with her. On our protagonist's side, as he and Yuko return home after their kind of date, he feels very happy to have spent a lovely afternoon with the girl he likes. But there's something that worries him, and that's the fact that during a small conversation they had, the girl mentioned she has a werewolf friend who she has known for years, something that leaves the boy pensive. On the way, they end up encountering a strange individual who seems to know Yuko, so Asahi, after seeing him up close and inspecting his appearance, realizes that the guy is the werewolf friend the girl mentioned. This individual introduces himself to them as Shiru, who came here on orders from his boss, the girl's father, to verify that she is still keeping the secret of being a vampire. Obviously, Shiru notices that this is not the case, as he noticed that Asahi didn't get scared when he saw him in his werewolf appearance, so trying to do his job, he intends to take her away to his boss. Faced with this, the protagonist jumps into the scene to prevent this, so he has a little fight with Shiru, which ends in a strange way as our boy challenges him to look at the moon to see if he really is a werewolf as he claims to be, to which the guy agrees to do so. The weird thing about this comes after this, as Shiru begins to transform, but he doesn't transform into a werewolf, but into a beautiful girl with purple hair, and this clearly leaves our protagonist speechless. This girl introduces herself to him as Shio, an ordinary girl who has the ability to transform into a werewolf. Asahi realizes after this that he was in front of the werewolf all this time, and he is impressed that the guy's true form is that of a girl, and to make matters worse, a very cute girl who embarrasses him shortly after by asking Yuko for On the other hand, Nagisa is on the train on her way to Yuko's house because she wants to apologize for rejecting her invitation to the amusement park. At the vampire's house, she tells our boy that Shio is the childhood friend she mentioned earlier, and she's a rather cloying girl. To prove it, Shio approaches Asahi and tries to seduce him with her charms to the point of almost kissing him. Faced with this, Yuko, in the midst of her jealousy, takes out a picture of a moon and shows it to the girl, which ironically served for Shio to transform into her werewolf version. Because of this, the werewolf, being in a compromising situation with our protagonist, tries to attack him, but this is stopped when the boy shows him the mood picture again, which transforms her into a girl. Now being on top of Asahi, she tries to seduce him again. The bad thing about this is that Nagisa arrives just to see this, and while she watches the scene, she thinks that our protagonist is escaped, so she leaves the place disappointed. Although she returns seconds later to try to understand the situation better, she finds out that a werewolf is the one on top of Asahi now, so the delegate decides to flee the place completely devastated by what her eyes saw. Shortly after, the werewolf transforms back into a girl, and after a brief conversation with Yuko, decides to stop trying to take her with her because she really doesn't want to do this. What the wolf part of her wants is Shiru. The next day, Asahi explained to Nagisa that both the girl and the boy who were in that compromising situation with him are the same person. The delegate feels relieved with this confession, but not for long, as later in the middle of the class, the teacher introduces to everyone a new student, who turns out to be none other than Shio. This leaves Nagisa, Yuko, and our boys shocked. After the previous events, Shio, now having Asahi closer than ever, tries as always to seduce him. This makes Nagisa quite jealous, so she doesn't intend to let these two do inappropriate things in front of her. Luckily, the boy manages to easily free himself from Shio's clutches, and once he flees the scene, he meets Yuko and proceeds to tell her everything that happened. While they're discussing this, suddenly they see a girl with horns passing by them, which clearly leaves them dumbfounded, so they can't think of a better idea than to follow her everywhere to try to find out who the girl is. Once they manage to catch up with her, she introduces herself to them as a canon, an ordinary student, and shows them that her horns are nothing more than accessories. This leaves our protagonists with more questions than answers, especially our boy, since when Akane leaves the place, he manages to see that the girl has a demon tail, and he lets Yuko know. But when the girl looks at Akane, she sees that she doesn't have any tail, leaving the boy as a complete liar. It turns out that the girl is using illusion tricks to play with the minds of our protagonists, although this joke ends where she meets Akari, who grabs her by the horns and scolds her for bothering her students, to which she replies that bothering students is part of her job as a demon. The protagonists, who were watching this scene, are amazed by this revelation and are even more surprised when the teacher, while scolding Akane, reveals that she is her great-grandmother. We head to the director's office, where Akane reveals to the protagonists that in addition to being a demon and Akari's great-grandmother, she is the director of the institution. Faced with this, Yuko thinks the girl is playing with them since she looks like a schoolgirl. She doesn't see her as an adult, so she treats the director as a child. This infuriates Akane so much that she uses her magic to cause disasters in the school, which is perceived by Nagisa, who is inside her ship in the forest, and facing such a level of magic, she decides to go investigate where it comes from. Returning to the director, she proposes a competition of sexuality to Yuko to demonstrate who of the two is more mature. That's why our boy is dragged to the school gym to witness this competition, where Shiho is the host. The competition consists of demonstrating who is the most, and they measure this based on how much Asahi bleeds when he sees them. In the first test of neither Yuko nor Akane were able to make the boy bleed because, ironically, the one who managed to do this is the host, Shiho. That's why she recommends to the other two that they wear swimsuits. But once again, the one who ends up making the boy bleed is Shiho, and so it goes in all the following tests, to the point that the girl completely weakens the boy, and after having completed her task, she leaves the place. Obviously, faced with this, the two girls get angry for not having been able to win the competition, so Yuko, as a final test, proposes to Akane to eat the spicy snacks she previously tasted, and whoever can eat this without complaining will be the winner. In this way, the two girls begin the test, and as they eat, they gradually begin to feel bad, to the point that upon eating the last snack, both generate a large explosion that completely destroys the gym. In the middle of this, Nagisa from her ship managed to get here since she detected that magic was coming from here, but upon witnessing the explosion, she was forced to leave the place. After the explosion, both Akane and Yuko end up scared and ashamed for causing this. On the side of the protagonist and the teacher, they both decide that they will try to prevent something like this from happening again. The next day, teacher Akari takes Asahi to the cooking class as punishment by order of the director for skipping classes the previous day. In the classroom, the boy is surprised to see Yuko, Nagisa, and Shio here, so the teacher tells him that he will have to work with them to prepare the best curry for Akane. In this way, the four get down to work. Firstly, Nagisa takes the lead, and using a recipe she found on the internet, she follows all the instructions and prepares a delicious chocolate cake. The downside of this is that the goal was to prepare curry, not a cake, so the delegate gets so angry that she hits the table and sends the cake flying, and it ends up landing on one of the director's horns, and she, upon tasting it, shudders at the rich and sweet taste. Returning to Nagisa, she apologizes to her classmates for using the wrong recipe. Upon this, Yuko encourages her with some nice words and suggests that, together, they give their best effort to prepare the curry properly. In this way, the four give their all to prepare the curry, and they end up achieving a good result. But despite having the curry ready, Nagisa and Yuko come up with the idea of taking the curry to the next level, so they join forces to achieve this, while our boy and Shio think this is a bad idea. Changing scenes, Akane takes advantage of Mikan by making her spend all her monthly money on food for her, promising her an interview. But at a moment when Mikan is distracted talking to Akari about what Akane made her do, the latter takes advantage of this moment to escape without giving her the interview, so Mikan is forced to chase her. Similarly, Akari finds her great-grandmother, and in order to make her pay for taking advantage of Mikan, she grabs her by the horns. Following this, she takes her with her to the cooking classroom. Once there, Akari wants to show Akane the curry that the students had to prepare for her, but when she opens the door, they are met with an extremely gruesome scene. The whole place is completely destroyed and with a putrid smell. That's why the teacher decides it's better to take her great-grandmother home to eat something. This was a complete mistake as Akane starts to destroy Akari's house, demanding that she bring Nagisa to prepare some chocolates for her, as she was impressed by the chocolate cake she tasted earlier, and she knows the delegate made it. And then she uses all the power of her horns to blow a powerful beam into the sky. This caused the next day an asteroid heading towards Earth, which according to the news will explode in less than 3 hours. That's why Akari is forced to ask Nagisa to prepare her famous chocolates, although she also asks the same of Yuko and Shio. The reason? She wants Akane to pay for destroying her apartment, and since she knows that her great-grandmother won't be able to wait long for Nagisa's chocolates, she'll have to stop the asteroid impact. That's why, while Nagisa prepares her chocolates, the teacher forces Akane to try the unpleasant chocolates made by Shiho and Yuko. Despite this, the director doesn't give up and continues with energy to keep her sanity under control, controlling the asteroid and waiting for the delegates' chocolates. But then, Mikan enters the classroom unannounced, and she is happy to see Akane tied up, so she decides to make her pay for what she did before. Akane, faced with this situation, begs Akari to release her, but she clearly doesn't intend to do so, so the director has no choice but to tell her to prepare for the end of the world. In this way, while some people worldwide prepare to receive the impact of the asteroid and others flee, Akane gets what she deserves from Mikan, and this causes several copies of the director to enter the scene, so all the girls join forces to confront the copies and Akane herself. Thanks to this confrontation, the asteroid veers away from Earth, so our protagonist runs as fast as he can to notify the girls of this. Faced with this strange scene, the boy is surprised and wonders what happened, but receiving no answer, he simply closes the door. Several days later, summer arrives and our protagonist gathers the courage to invite Yuko to spend the afternoon with him at the school pool. She accepts the invitation on the condition that Nagisa and Shio accompany her to help her learn to swim. As it turns out, she doesn't know how to swim, to which the boy obviously has no choice but to accept. Moving to the pool, firstly, Shio acts as a swimming instructor for our boy and Yuko, but her methods are unpleasant, which annoys Nagisa, so she takes over as the teacher. The delegate does a good job teaching our protagonist how to swim, but at a certain point, she touches the boy's body to correct his posture, which led to him misinterpreting the situation and her getting nervous about it. For this reason, Nagisa decides to stop being the protagonist's teacher and lets them practice on their own, which ironically was the best option as these two have a good time practicing together. When Mikan arrives and sees the protagonist so happy with Yuko, she can't help but think that the boy is in love with the girl. Faced with these statements, the protagonist's friends mock her, as she is the least qualified to speak about love, and this clearly angers the girl. Hours later, minutes before the pool closes, Yuko whispers something in Asahi's ear, leaving him speechless, and after that, she leaves the place on her own, while the boy leaves with his friends, although he separates from them under the pretext of having something to do. It's then that, at dusk, Asahi meets Yuko at the school pool once again, as it turns out that what the girl had whispered in his ear before was that she wanted to practice swimming alone with him. In this way, using a secret entrance, the protagonists enter the pool and start practicing, and after a few minutes of practice, they take a break. During the break, Yuko reveals to the boy that the idea of coming at this late hour to practice alone with him occurred to her after remembering that her parents used to do this in their youth, which brings back good memories of them. And in the midst of this sentimental moment, the girl tells the protagonist that she's glad she met him because before knowing him, she used to be alone at school. But after becoming his friend, her life changed forever, and she was able to enjoy being in school for the first time. After these words, she thanks him for changing her life for the better by calling him by his name, Asahi. This makes the boy nervous, as Yuko had never called him that before, so he also calls her by her name, which now makes her nervous, and in the midst of this awkward situation, both decide to go back to swimming practice. While the protagonists practice, the headmistress from her office observes them carefully, as seeing them in this situation reminds her of the girl's parents, who did the same thing in their time, so she suspects that our protagonists are on the verge of having a romance similar to Yuko's parents. Returning to the pool, after testing her endurance underwater and completing a challenge proposed by our boy, she is so happy to have fulfilled it that she gives him a tight hug. The next day, Asahi and Yuko go to a pastry buffet with Oka, Shima, and Sakura, where a series of incidents occur. Initially, Yuko, delighting in the pastries, becomes so excited that she involuntarily unfurls her vampire wings. Asahi quickly warns her via text message to hide her wings to avoid drawing attention. Later, Asahi observes bats outside the establishment and quickly lowers the blinds to prevent their friends from seeing them. Additionally, Mikan, a waitress at the place, insists that Yuko try her snacks. As an act of solidarity, Asahi and Shima try the snacks and end up unconscious due to the spiciness. The next day, Mikan desperately searches for her lost glasses. Upon finding the protagonists, she asks for their help. They let her know that her glasses are just an accessory. But for Mikan, they mean more than that, so not receiving help from her friends, she continues the search on her own. In the courtyard, she encounters the delegate, who offers to help her, but then Mikan manages to see that the director has her glasses. This triggers a chase between she and the girls, and shortly after, our boy joins in to help them. After a long chase, Akane, feeling cornered, uses her powers to create several copies of herself, all wearing Mikan's glasses, and seeing that the protagonists don't react to this, she decides to flee, believing she has won. Unfortunately for her, teacher Akari manages to stop her escape and forces her and all of her copies into her classroom, and after doing this, she returns Mikan's glasses and personally takes care of giving the director a lesson. With Mikan having her precious glasses back, she is happy, as is our protagonist, who leaves the place to notify Yuko of this. Returning to Mikan and her glasses, they begin to speak to her, which is overheard by Nagisa, so the girl is forced to confess to her that her glasses have a life of their own. Later, when the two are alone, the girl's glasses introduce themselves to Nagisa as Fuku-chan, a fortune god whose goal is to bring luck to its wearer. Neither of the girls believes that Fuku-chan is a fortune god, so it is forced to prove itself, and it does so by showing them the location of a four-leaf clover and a rainbow, although all this demonstration was nothing more than pure coincidence. For this reason, Fuku lets Mikan know that she has felt something for our protagonist since they were children, as he was the one who gave her the glasses in the first place. Upon being reminded of this, the girl becomes so angry that she decides to throw them into the river, and they, feeling threatened by this, decide to reveal something stronger, as they tell her that what she really wanted was to marry Asahi. This angers the girl even more, so she decides to try to break Fuku. While on Nagisa's side upon this revelation, she worries about having to deal with another girl who likes our boy. To make the delegate not feel bad about this, Mikan tells her that she doesn't feel anything for Asahi, as what she felt for him is in the past. Facing this, Fuku-chan knows that the girl is lying, and using its powers as a fortune god, summons the boy to confess Mikan's feelings to him. This provokes a tough fight between Mikan and her glasses, and Nagisa, in order to help her, does everything possible to distract the protagonist and Yuko. And although she manages to do so, Fuku emerges victorious and is ready to confess Mikan's feelings to Asahi. This is why the delegate decides to take a big step by taking the glasses and putting them on. The downside is that by doing this, Fuku-chan tells our boy that it's in love with him. That's why Asahi has an arranged date with Nagisa at the Japanese festival, but not because they wanted to, but because Yuko and Shio forced them to meet under the excuse that they would arrive later. While the couple wanders through the festival, it can't help but feel uncomfortable about what happened before, so the boy, to try to cheer up the girl, takes her to the shooting gallery game, where they both have a lot of fun. This is seen by the vampire and Shio, who are happy for the couple, but that Mikan arrives at the place, and after the girls confess that they are spying on the protagonist and the delegate, upon spying on them again, they realize that they have gone elsewhere, so they pursue them. After playing several games at the festival and winning some prizes, the couple has so much fun that they forget their discomfort and start getting along much better, and precisely because of this, Nagisa feels that she is truly in love with the boy, so she decides to buy ice cream to stop thinking about him. While the delegate buys the ice cream, she notices the presence of Yuko and Shio by her side. So along with the boy, they chase them to punish them for being late, but in the middle of this chase, Nagisa falls on top of the protagonist, which reminds her of the time the boy fell on top of her before. That's why she gives up trying to pretend that she doesn't feel anything for the boy, so she leans against his chest, feeling the warmth of his body, and Yuko, seeing this shocking scene, is left speechless. For this reason, the next day in class, the vampire leaves the classroom early, which seems strange to our boy, so he sets out to look for her. While he searches for her, he encounters Mikan in the hallway, so the boy asks her if she knows where Yuko is. The girl responds that Yuko left the classroom because she couldn't stand to see him after the compromising situation he had with Nagisa yesterday. That's why our protagonist sets out to find the vampire. She, for her part, is in the director's office, still shocked by what happened between Asahi and Nagisa. That's why Akane brings her back to reality by mentioning that there's nothing between the boy and the delegate, so she has nothing to worry about. In addition, she mentions that if she was so shocked to see them hugging, it's because maybe she's the one who's in love with Asahi. This angers Yuko because, according to her, she doesn't feel anything for the boy. After saying this, the girl leaves, but it's after this exit that new problems begin. The director, using her illusion powers and her copies, creates several fake scenes between a fictional Asahi and a fictional Yuko, and shows them to the vampire, which makes her nervous. After several scenes like that, in the end, the girl gets so tired that she shouts at Akane to stop. The director doesn't intend to stop, so using her last card up her sleeve, she approaches Yuko to give her a kiss, clearly using Asahi's appearance. Fortunately for the vampire, this inappropriate kiss is avoided because teacher Akari arrived just in time to teach her great-grandmother a lesson for tying her up and making Yuko uncomfortable, and she begins to chase her as she flees. Shortly after this, the real protagonist arrives at the scene, ready to tell the truth about what happened between him and Nagisa. Before he could say anything, Akari arrives to give the boy a lesson, believing that he is Akane disguised as him. In the midst of all this, Yuko decides to run away from the place, leaving the boy worried since he couldn't tell her his version of the events with the delegate. The protagonist's concern is so great that the next day in class, he tells his friends that Yuko has been treating him indifferently, and he doesn't know what to do to make her treat him as before. They advise him to start by inviting her to walk home together so they can talk and clear things up, which seems more than perfect for the boy. On the other hand, Nagisa overhears this conversation and understanding that Asahi is distant from Yuko because of her, she believes that needs to apologize to them and clarify the whole matter. But before she could do this, the director appears in front of her and threatens her with publishing in the school newspaper a photo showing the exact moment when she and the protagonist are hugging at the festival to make her realize that she is in love with him. Fortunately for the delegate, teacher Akari shows up once again to reprimand her great-grandmother and take her away, so she stops bothering her students, and in doing so, the director drops the photo, so Nagisa grabs it and decides to keep it for herself. Unfortunately, the protagonist and his friends arrive at the scene, and shortly after, Mikan also arrives. Seeing that Nagisa is hiding something behind her, the girl starts struggling with the delegate to show her what she's hiding. Ironically, the photo ends up in Asahi's hands, leading Nagisa to smack him with 2 ice creams on his face, causing him to fall into a compromising position with the girl. Yuko arrives at the scene shortly after and seeing Asahi and Nagisa so close, decides to run away from the place, feeling quite depressed. Back at home, the vampire seriously considers what to do to confront her feelings for the protagonist, and remembering Shio's advice, she believes the best option is to be honest with her feelings and confess them to the boy. So the next day, Yuko talks to Asahi to ask him to meet her on the school rooftop after classes. Upon hearing this, the boy tells his friends, and they support and encourage him to confess his feelings once and for all at this upcoming meeting with the girl. Thanks to this support, the protagonist heads as fast as he can to the rooftop, but on his way, he encounters Nagisa, who chases him using a shovel to knock him out and prevent him from confessing to the vampire. This seems quite strange to Asahi, so when he sees that the door to the rooftop is blocked, he asks her why she doesn't want to let him see Yuko. The girl, in tears, tells him that she doesn't know why she's trying to prevent this, although internally knows that she's doing it because she's in love with him. Without giving much importance to the delegate's words, the boy continues his way and starts climbing the chairs and tables blocking the entrance to the rooftop. Upon reaching the door and opening it, he is surprised to see Yuko's father taking her away, gradually disappearing into the sky. This completely shocks the protagonist, but he doesn't intend to stand idly by. Just as Nagisa arrives at the rooftop, the boy asks her for help in finding Yuko, wherever she may be. In this way, Asahi, along with Nagisa and Shio, go in teacher Akari's car in search of Yuko, following the trail in the sky. The downside of this is that Akari's car is too slow. That's why Akane appears and, using her powers, puts Akari to sleep and drives the car to the nearest place to the vampire mansion, where she suspects the vampire is. As a consequence of this, Akari's car ends up completely destroyed, so she chases after her great-grandmother to teach her a lesson for what she did. Going back to our protagonists, Nagisa first apologizes to the boy for preventing him from seeing Yuko on the rooftop, so to remedy her misdeed, she decides to help him this time and commits to being the leader of the plan to infiltrate the vampire mansion. Once inside the mansion, the protagonists are startled to see a giant man who turns out to be Yuko's father named Genjiro. Because of this, Asahi speaks with him peacefully to ask him to hand over the girl, something that the man clearly refuses to do. Just at that moment, the vampire comes out of one of the rooms, so the delegate takes advantage to attack Genjiro, while the protagonist takes this opportunity to take her as far away as possible. This leads them to the mansion's courtyard, where the boy apologizes to her for causing her departure from school and regrets not being able to keep his secret. Ironically, Yuko responds that her father didn't take her away from school because of that, but because he took her to take care of her mother, who is ill with fever. These words put the boy in an embarrassing situation because he came all this way for nothing, and he accidentally mentions to the girl that he thought she was taken away after she revealed his secret. Unfortunately for Asahi, by saying this, Genjiro finds out that his daughter didn't keep her promise to keep the secret. This is stopped by Nagisa, which gives time for the boy and the vampire to flee the place, and they end up hiding in her room. Once there, they are no longer in danger of being found, so Asahi apologizes for revealing that he knows her secret in front of her father. The girl responds that it's not necessary for him to apologize since she was who first showed her true form without considering that someone might see her. In addition to this, Yuko reveals that she feels bad every time she ignores him, but she ignores him because she can't stand to see him after everything he did with Nagisa. Obviously, the protagonist confesses that everything that happened with the delegate were just misunderstandings, so he apologizes to her for unintentionally making her think that there was something between him and Nagisa. Suddenly, Genjiro bursts into the room, breaking the door, and tries to catch his daughter. Fortunately for her, her mother appears at the right moment to reprimand her husband and chases him away with a stake, managing to make him leave the room where our protagonists are. After this, the boy and the vampire build a new door and prepare to wait until the next day to escape from the mansion. The downside of this idea is that it makes them both quite uncomfortable, so much so that at one point the girl falls to the ground and the boy ends up on top of her. This creates a loud noise that is heard by Nagisa, so when she heads to the room where she heard the noise, she finds the protagonists in a rather compromising situation. Faced with this, the delegate takes out her hammer and tries to hit the boy for being a although he manages to stop the girl and tells her that he came up with an idea because of her action. So Asahi and the girls head to Genjuru's office, where the boy tells the man that in order for Yuko to continue attending school, he is willing to erase all his memories of the girl. Genjuru accepts this proposal from the boy, so now he asks Nagisa to hit him with a hammer and thus erase his memories. The delegate tries to hit the boy, but her good times with him and Yuko don't allow her to. That's why Asahi decides to hit himself, although before he could do it, Yuko pushes him to prevent him from doing it, and tearfully tells him that he doesn't have to erase his memories because his life wouldn't be the same if he forgot about her. In the midst of this conversation, strangely enough, the girl's father falls to the ground because when she pushed the protagonist, he sent the hammer flying, which hit Genjuru and left him unconscious. The next day, our protagonist apologizes to Yuko's mother for accidentally hitting her husband, to which she accepts his apologies. As for the girl's father, he shows his displeasure and says goodbye to her in a bad way, which angers the girl. Shortly after leaving, Genjuru pursues them from outside just to properly say goodbye to his daughter, and when she sees him, she returns the greeting, thus improving their relationship. Shortly after this, Asahi tells Yuko that he will never act clumsily with her again. And with a more confident attitude, he promises her that he will never reveal their secret to others. This makes the girl happy to see this new version of the boy, and with this, the anime concludes.